Let's begin with a confession. Marketing books often feel like corporate speed dating. Slick, over-promising, and stuffed with recycled wisdom about leveraging synergy or maximizing impact. You get 30 pages of substance, padded out with 200 pages of fluff. Not Brainfluence. Roger Dooley doesn't waste your time or talk down to you. Instead, he opens the door to something quietly radical, the science behind why people say yes. From the moment you open Brainfluence, it feels like you've stepped into the office of a friendly behavioral scientist who moonlights as a marketer. He's got the credentials, the research, the real-world examples, but he's also got a sense of humor and the instincts of someone who's tried these ideas in the field. The book isn't about cold manipulation. It's about tuning into how the human brain actually works, what triggers emotion, what drives choice, and what quietly nudges us toward by now before logic even joins the party. The structure of the book is like a neuroscience tapas bar. Instead of one long thesis, Dooley offers 100 bite-sized insights, each no more than 3 to 4 pages, bundled loosely into 15 categories, from pricing and packaging to social proof and storytelling. These aren't vague platitudes. They're grounded in neuromarketing studies, psychological research, and field-tested marketing experiments. The chapters don't build on each other, and that's the point. This book is made to be dipped into, dog-eared returned to. You can start anywhere and still get something useful out of it. One of the most eye-opening early concepts is the idea that spending money causes pain, literal neurological pain. Researchers from Carnegie Mellon and Stanford used fMRI scans and found that when people consider spending money, the pain centers in the brain, specifically the insula, light up. The more expensive the item, the more intense the response. It's not that spending feels like pain, it is pain to the brain. This flips so much conventional marketing wisdom on its head. You're not just asking someone to evaluate value, you're asking them to experience discomfort. Dooley doesn't just deliver the insight, he shows how marketers can reduce that pain. Break costs into installments. Reframe the product as a pain reliever, especially effective for tightwads. Use charm pricing. All small shifts, but they lower the discomfort level. And that often means the difference between abandoned cart and closed sale. But price is only one piece of the neuromarketing puzzle. Brainfluence then explores something much more subtle and oddly overlooked by most marketers, the role of the senses. Smell, texture, sound, temperature, Dooley takes us on a sensory tour of the subconscious. For instance, studies show that shoppers exposed to a pleasant scent in a retail space rate the same products as more desirable. Not because they're aware of the scent, but because smell is processed in the limbic system, where memory and emotion are stored. One of the book's most delightful examples comes from Singapore Airlines, which developed a custom fragrance and infused it into hot towels, uniforms, and cabin interiors. The result? A subtle but powerful brand identity, anchored in smell. Touch is equally fascinating. Holding a heavier object, like a clipboard, can make people treat a subject as more important. A soft chair leads to more agreeable negotiation. Even ambient temperature influences judgment. Warm beverages can make people perceive others as more trustworthy. Dooley's tone is always that of a well-meaning magician sharing his tricks. These aren't gimmicks, they're access points to human behavior that bypass the rational brain entirely. Then we move into visual influence, arguably the area where most marketers think they're already experts. But Dooley shows how shallow that assumption is. Faces in ads, for example, should be looking at the product, not the camera, because humans naturally follow gaze direction. The placement of a baby's face in a Pampers ad dramatically shifts viewer attention depending on where the baby's eyes are pointed. Even the direction a product is facing can spark the motor cortex into action, making us feel like we're already holding it. When you know this, you'll never look at shelf displays or website banners the same way again. At this point, if you're expecting things to get more complex, they don't, they get smarter. The middle of the book is where Dooley really shines, diving into behavioral economics territory. Anchoring, decoy pricing, loss aversion, scarcity bias. It's like getting a masterclass in human irrationality served with a side of marketing strategy. One especially juicy nugget is how presenting a high-priced, anchor product first, say, a $5,000 espresso machine, makes your $1,000 version feel reasonable, even cheap. Or how adding a slightly worse version of your product as a third option can boost preference for the premium one. These aren't theoretical musings. They're lab-tested, market-proven quirks of decision-making. Loss aversion might be the crown jewel here. Humans hate to lose more than they love to win. In real terms, that means if you frame a product or service in terms of what someone might miss out on, instead of what they might gain, you increase conversion. You're not just selling a benefit, you're protecting them from a loss. And then there's scarcity, another primal lever. Limited editions, countdown timers, only 3 left, banners. They all tap into that reptilian part of the brain that doesn't want to miss out. The brilliance of Dooley is that he never oversells these tactics. He just lays them out, explains the brain mechanics, and lets you run the experiments. If you're wondering whether emotion matters more than logic, Dooley's answer is a resounding yes. And he's got the data to prove it. Emotional advertising doesn't just drive engagement, it boosts long-term brand loyalty. People remember how something made them feel far longer than they remember what it cost. That's why storytelling is so potent. A good story, infused with nostalgia or surprise or humor, travels directly to the emotional core of the brain. Logic, that comes later, when the buyer is already halfway to checkout, rationalizing their impulse with specs and features. Dooley's breakdown of ad campaigns that lead with feeling and follow with facts is a masterclass in order of operations. If your marketing leads with bullet points instead of a good story, you're playing chess without half the pieces. Of course, it wouldn't be a book about influence without talking about trust. And here, Dooley veers into neuroscience's softer side. Trust isn't just a concept, it's a neurochemical experience involving the release of oxytocin. That means small gestures can have outsized effects. A refund handled with empathy, a personal reply on social media, an unexpected gift. Dooley dives into the science of reciprocity too, how giving value up front creates an unconscious obligation to return the favor. Free trials, samples, helpful guides, all prime the pump for a yes. The science of social proof is layered on top of this. We look to others to guide our behavior. But not just any others, the right others. Testimonials from people who resemble your audience in age, lifestyle, values, are far more persuasive than generic blurbs from strangers. The digital marketing section is especially handy for today's creators and copywriters. Dooley gets tactical. Progress bars boost form completion, friendly language and buttons, get my free guide. Outperforms robotic terms, submit. And colors trigger unconscious associations, red for urgency, blue for trust. Even word choice matters. A study showed that using the word because increases compliance, even if the reason after it is nonsense. The brain hears a familiar structure, do X because Y, and skips critical evaluation. The ethical implications here are handled delicately. Dooley doesn't recommend trickery, but awareness. One thing Brainfluence doesn't shy away from is complexity. Dooley discusses how gender, age, and cultural context shape consumer response. Women, for instance, may respond more to emotional narratives, while men gravitate to status cues. Collectivist cultures value community and tradition. Individualistic ones favor independence and uniqueness. The key takeaway: don't stereotype. Test. Neuromarketing is as much about listening as it is about speaking. The goal is resonance, not manipulation. A refreshing note in the book is its commitment to ethics. Dooley repeatedly reminds the reader that understanding the brain isn't a license to exploit it. Influence, in his view, is about helping customers make better choices, not sneakier ones. It's about reducing friction, offering clarity, and earning trust. If you're looking for dark arts manipulation, look elsewhere. Dooley's tone remains generous, honest, and above all, human. Now, for all its charm and insight, Brainfluence isn't perfect. Some readers may find the 100-chapter structure a bit choppy. Because each idea stands alone, there's less of a narrative arc. You won't find a grand unifying theory here, more like a very long dinner with 100 tasty dishes. A few concepts get repeated with minor variations, scarcity shows up in multiple forms, and not every study cited has ironclad consensus in the neuroscience community. But these are minor quibbles. The real value of the book lies not in its novelty, but in its accessibility and actionability. If you're a seasoned behavioral economist, you might not learn anything brand new here. But if you're in the trenches, Writing copy, building landing pages, designing ads, optimizing emails, this book is gold. It's full of small changes with big results. More importantly, it shifts your mindset. You start seeing every price tag, every font, every product photo not as a static thing, but as a signal to the brain. You begin to understand how people feel their way through decisions. In the end, Brainfluence is less a marketing manual than a guided tour of the human condition, told through the lens of commerce. It's witty, smart, compassionate, and never self-important. Dooley doesn't promise miracles. He just helps you understand why people do what they do and how to meet them there with empathy and insight. You come away not just as a better marketer, but as a sharper observer of life itself. If you've ever wondered why some ads make your heart race, why some products just feel right, or why you impulse bought that thing you definitely didn't need, Brainfluence won't just explain it. It'll make you smile about it, and maybe, just maybe, help you create something that lights up someone else's brain in just the right way.